Thank you, everybody. Welcome today to the American Chiropractors TAC Tic Talk. Today we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Arlan Fuhr, who is a living legend in our industry. If you've not heard of him, you must be sleeping under a rock. But here you are today. Thank you so much, Dr. Fuhr, for joining us. And of course, I'm going to leave a lot of the questions and answers back and forth with our wonderful editor and chiropractor, Dr. Joe Bush. Thank you, Dr. Joe. And Arlan, I'll let you kind of lead the way and tell us what's going on in the life of Dr. Arlan Fuhr today.
Well,
that the American chiropractors want to know about.
There's actually a lot going on. About 15 years ago, we were driving, and my wife looked over at me and she said, "You're getting old." And I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "What I mean is you got a lot of experience and you can't run around teaching seminars every weekend like you've done for all your life. You're going to have to digitize this." And I said, "That's not a bad idea." And she said, "My gosh, you agree with me?" And so 15 years ago, we started digitizing the technique because we wanted to standardize it. I don't know if you know this, but Activator is now taught in 38 colleges and universities in the chiropractic world, internationally and in the United States. And so we have the majority of the colleges covered. And so when COVID hit, it was fantastic because I'll use Logan as an example. They shut the school down, but they had all of their Activator stuff downloaded on their computers. So the students simply took their computers home and kept right on with their learning ability, even during a pandemic. And so that's one of the reasons. But the other one is people can choose what they want instead of costing a lot of money to go to hotels and restaurants and all that kind of thing. It costs a mere $399 to take everything from the basic scan protocol all the way up to things that we're working on right now, like geriatrics. And speaking of geriatrics, because I am one, I have a heart for it. And I know that many people don't know this, but my wife had a torn ligament in her trochanter. And so last year, there's only one doctor in Phoenix, and Phoenix is the hip replacement capital of the world. Dr. Jimmy Chow examined her and said, X-rays didn't show anything. And he said, "You're getting an MRI." And when he saw the MRI, he said, "She's got a pulled gluteus minimus and a pulled gluteus minor, and pulled out of the trochanter." And he said, "We used to, in the medical world, give shots. We used to give them cortisone shots." And he said, "Today, now, even Medicare is changing their diagnosis called lateral point hip pain." And so he said, "I've done 5,000 hips. I've done 27 reattachment ligaments because they just found a polyethylene material that they can use to hook the ligament back into the bone." So Judy, he said, "You're number 28. And he said, "I know it sounds a bit experimental, but we've done, some real background work on this." So let's fast forward. She spent 10 months on a walker.
So, Dr. Ford, this is fascinating. What is the name of the podcast that you do?
It's called Activate Your Practice.
Activate Your Practice. And so that's on the Apple store and all that.
Yeah, you can go to YouTube or you can go to any place and find it.
Perfect, because I'm going to make sure that I'm listening to that one. You're a wealth of knowledge. Now, so you're training people on how to treat animals?
Well, we have a virtual training session on animals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Dr. Susan Roker is in a big animal hospital in Missouri, and that's how they're paying her student loan off if she works for them for a period of time.
That sounds awesome.
So she's really good. And so she agreed then to fly to Vegas where our platform is, and she had people there that brought their animals over. And so it was quite a thing. We had babies in the morning and dogs in the afternoon. And so it was quite a recording session.
Well, I mean, people love their animals, some of them more than their kids, So the question is, can anyone learn this technique? Like, do vets participate in that, or is it only chiropractors?
No, it's veterinarians, chiropractors. You have to be a licensed healthcare professional.
Perfect. No, I mean, because I have vets who are interested. They're always trying to, figure out ways to help their animals. And I'm like,
Yes.
so I'll refer them to this instead of the acupuncture and stuff,
Yeah. Well, and my wife, is usually good at strategizing things. And she said, there's people, like you said, Joe, there's people that like their animals better than their kids. And they, they just jumped on this because, I wanted to know what to do because my dog jumped off a couch one time and hurt her front hip. And
Sure.
that's showed me right where to go and what to do.
Perfect. Well, if you're ever interested in, working on animals, this is, I think, way better than this. You see some of these videos on TikTok where they're cracking the Rottweiler's neck. I mean, let's use that looks a little not okay. So, Dr. Ford, becoming a proficiency rated chiropractor, what does that look like? I know you're teaching it in schools, but a lot of people out here listening right now are thinking, I never got that. So, how can they learn this?
Well, you can go, like I said, to activator.com and then to the virtual training. And that will explain it all to you. And it costs $399. I mean, you can't even fly someplace for that. And that gives you 12 hours of virtual training. And like I said, it varies from animals to geriatrics to there's all different types of programs, upper extremity, lower extremity. And we now have over 2,000 proficiency rated doctors and students coming out of school. And several of the chiropractic colleges are now taking the proficiency rating test because they take the classes in school. So when they graduate, as soon as they get a license and they give that certificate to us, we can put them on the proficiency rated list. Now, last month, we sent 17,000 patients to our proficiency rated doctors. That's a lot of people out there. And so
That is incredible. That's 8 patients per chiropractor. So for $399, you have access to that kind of a network. It's incredible.
exactly, it's a no brainer. And I've only been working on this for 15 years, so, but
hmm
to tell chiropractors to do something is kind of a bit of a challenge at times.
Well, but how many pets did you send them, Dr. Ford?
Oh, well, that I can't tell you.
Well, not yet, right? But so that's cool. I mean, I would definitely encourage it. It's a pleasure having you on TAC Tic Talk here with us. In the article that you wrote for us in December, there's a lot of this information and background information. What does it take to be the number one instrument adjusting chiropractic technique by Dr. Arlan Fuhr? We're always honored to have you in our pages. I hope you continue writing, and just sharing some of these secrets, or even anyone from your team technique, chiropractic technique. We all need that, angle to help that patient. And
Well,
so,
and another thing you might be really interested in, Joe, and that is in 2025, FDA used to be a separate entity and you never saw them. Maybe they'd come once every 10 years.
mhm,
Now, the FDA is getting together with what's called ISO 13485. That's another government regulation. They have joined hands and they're going to merge so they have one regulatory body. If you don't have your equipment certified in ISO 13,
Dr. Fuhr, now not all adjusting instruments are created equal. You guys have been the standard for chiropractic for over the last 40 years. Can you talk a little bit about things that chiropractors need to be aware of if they're using these types of instruments?
yes, in 2025, there's a big change taking place, and we just spent $400,000 and 4 years to bring all of our instruments into compliance. And that's important for doctors to know because it's not a matter of if you'll get sued, it's when you'll get sued. And if you do get sued, you want to have the correct documentation and the correct regulation stuff all done. And so a student asked me, one day, how come an activator costs more money? I said, well, number one, it's all stainless steel, it's all good electronics. But number two is we spent a lot of money making it work in the world. And so that's what we did in this process over almost 5 years now. We have a CE mark in Europe. We have the ISO 13485 and another one called MedSap, and that's all over the country. And if you don't have those correct regulations on your equipment, then you go to a lawsuit and you got a big problem. And I could tell you several stories in that area.
Well, do I mean I always thought like most people out there would think that there's no big deal if they're using an instrument. You know, they can buy you can buy lookalikes on Scripps website or whatever, Meyer
Yeah.
DC. You know, I mean, like, so is there a risk there? Do people get sued for these types of things?
Well, what happens is they get sued for something else. And then the lawyers say, "What instrument were you using?" And they all say, I'm using an activator. They don't even say they're using a knockoff. But the first thing that our people do when they go into the case is they check to see what instrument it is.
Hmm.
If it's not an activator, we won't even defend you. And
Hmm.
we have a senior instructor and activator that's what he does is he defends people in cases. And he just won a case in the Northeast that I thought was fabulous. And he won it because we've got over 150 peer reviewed papers now with the
Mhm,
data showing how much force that we're using.
mhm.
Let me give you another example how careful we are. Our new electronic instrument, the Activator 5, we used that in a big animal study for Ted Carrick in University of Central Florida. And in that, they needed to have only so much force to the animal to see if it could move an atlas. We designed a tip for the Activator 5 to do that study with the animals. And it turned out we were able to control the instrument to less than 20 newtons of force. Now, the literature says that when you have uh, a baby from 0 to 90 days, you cannot use more than 20 newtons of force. We now have an instrument with a pediatric tip, and that's what came out of this animal study. And to get you to have an idea, Ted Carrick does a lot of big time studies. We're doing one on dementia right now. What happens when you adjust an animal with dementia? They can, by the way, have dementia in an animal. They can tell if it has dementia. And the other thing is, we're doing a study. We got a call from Ohio State University, the Ohio State, as they said,
Nah,
and
just
they said, "We understand you're an expert in force because we're doing an animal study." And I said, "Well, I have experts. I'm a clinician, but I'd be glad to help you." So we're now involved in a big RO1 for $4 million at Ohio State. So just
wow.
to show you what happens when you get enough papers, and let me repeat, we've got 150 plus peer-reviewed papers plus 30 clinical trials. That only took 30 years.
So I just want to get back to this FDA approval thing because you mentioned that in 2025, the laws are changing around these instruments a bit. And what does that mean? Are all these adjusting instruments we see advertised, or we have advertised even, they're not, are they compliant, or are they going to be at risk, or?
They're going to be at risk if they're not compliant. And from what we've seen, they're not spending the money to be in compliance. And that's a problem. And just like the other day, the ones that have cords on them have to have UL approval, and they lost their UL approval, and Canada has already shut them down. And so
Mhm.
I'm just saying this as a warning that
Yeah.
check them, call them up, and ask them, do you have a MedSap or do you have ISO 13485? It's that simple. ISO 13485, and I mean, if they don't know about it, then you got a real problem.
Arlen, you said the ones that have cords on them, meaning instrument adjusters that are connected with a cord to the
Yes,
electrical outlet. Would
yes.
Do you know the reasoning why that would be? That's
Well, because they haven't met the standards, and UL that's what the UL approval does. It makes it safe, and so they have to have that, and they haven't spent the money to bring it up into compliance, and so they shut them down. And
so they have
Canada,
to be battery powered. Is that it? They're battery powered type of devices instead of connected to the electrical outlet.
yeah, that's a different thing. But we're the only handheld electronic instrument that's not plugged in. There,
Really?
there is no other one.
So you're saying all of the ones that are connected with an electrical outlet,
Yeah,
that's not even
They
yeah,
have to comply with a different set of laws.
yeah.
So
Okay.
that's incredibly insightful. And yes, listeners, be attentive. We all need to be walking within that fine line. And you know
Mhm.
how medical legal is now. Dr. Ford, you work with different organizations throughout chiropractic. And recently, even, we saw that you contributed a substantial sum of money to Logan. Can you talk a little bit about uh, that? I think now that there's a building in your name, how awesome is that?
Well, somebody asked me why I was so happy when we dedicated the Fuhr Science Center. And I said, the reason I'm happy is usually they dedicate buildings to dead people. And so I have the opportunity to be here to my own dedication. And I really makes me quite happy to be able to do that. And it's a 50,000 square foot building that has all the different techniques and sciences and everything in it. And it's all state of the art. I mean, from the electronics to the anatomy tables, that are all electronic that can put 100 kids in a room and then flash the thing up on the screen. And they were showing a pregnant woman they had actually anatomized, and so it's just the number one type of a place to go to learn. And
Mhm.
I'm a Logan graduate, obviously, for about 60 years, so I've seen a lot of changes. And Logan's going to have their anniversary, 90 years next year. So
Mhm.
it's a big mark for Logan to have this kind of facility on the campus. And it's 109 acres of absolutely gorgeous campus.
No,
Our daughter came to the dedication and she said, I'd go here because she saw two deer drinking out of the pool in front of the college.
Wow.
no,
So,
it's a
yeah,
beautiful facility, and they should be proud of what they've been able to create. I mean, it's just I visited it after I graduated, and just the facilities are shocking. It's peaceful. I'm not a fan of St. Louis really, but I mean, if you're going to be at a school, it's as good as it gets.
well, St. Louis, one thing that's really valuable there is the cost of living in St. Louis compared to Los Angeles or
Sure.
the East
Mhm.
Coast. It's just half.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
a student can come there and they can survive in
Right.
St.
That's
Louis.
the
So
deal.
that's,
Right? Yeah, you got to be
yeah.
able to survive. It's tough. It's tough as a student. So, well, it sounds like they're teaching the activator method. So you're going to come out and you're going to be proficiency rated. You might have access to 8 patients a month from that technique alone. I mean, phenomenal, right?
Mhm.
So,
Well, and Dr. Four, I wanted to jump in here too, because I know you'd mentioned at some point about how you guys have been getting these proficiency rated in the activator technique, that they're getting up over 17,000 patient referrals to these doctors. Now, about how many of these doctors currently, because I heard you say to me before this that you guys need more doctors who are getting proficiency rated because you have a higher demand of patients now and you need people to refer them to. Is that true?
That's correct. And for example, I'm just using Logan as an example. When they graduate from Logan, they've gone through the activators because it's a core curriculum.
Hmm.
So they get proficiency rated. And as soon as they graduate and get a license, the minute they get a license, they just put their license number into Activator, and we put them on the proficiency rated group of doctors out there. And so not only is it good for them if they start their own practice, which most don't, it's good if they're looking for associateships because the activator practices love to hire new activator doctors. And
Hmm.
so it gives them an opportunity when they get out to be hired rather quickly.
Hmm. That's, and then you'd mentioned too, over all the years I'd asked, you got a long history in the profession, about how many devices have been sold of activators?
Well, we lost count at 100,000. And, but remember, that's over 50 years. And 70% of people use activator in one form or another in their office. Probably 60% don't know what they're doing, but they've got one in the drawer. And so that's why we want to keep them up to speed. And that's why we started that proficiency rating because it standardizes their care as much as we can.
And now they can do all that proficiency rating. Is that online?
Yes,
That's
you can do it
amazing.
each year, like starting right now. They don't do it in the beginning of the year when they could have a lot of time. They do it in November, December, because that's the end of the year. And so
Right.
our people are swamped this time of the year. So the better the faster you can get in, the better it is for you.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, and I was going back over years ago, 2012. interviews with Arlan, Dr. Fuhr here on the front cover of the American Chiropractor. And in this article that we did, A Chiropractic Revolution, the history of the activator instrument adjusting, you tell us one of the first questions was, how did you create this device in the first place? Why did you create it? Because I know chiropractors are big about, healing with their hands. And so just right out of the gate, I thought it was very informative. And I don't know if doctors realize the benefit to the doctor as well as the patient. So I wanted you to lead in and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, if you look at surgeons today, do they do it with their hands? They do it robotically. And so medicine has opened up to the scientific world much more than chiropractic. They hang on to their old philosophy things.
Okay.
And what we started, I practiced in a small town in southern Minnesota, 4,000 people. And we had farm patients, and they would hurt themselves, and they would really hurt themselves, and they'd carry them into the office. You couldn't give them a lumbar roll because they were in too much pain. And so we used basic technique and we used toughness. Well, here's a good example of regulation. One night we got a call from our neighbor, and he said, get your toughness instruments out of the office because the FDA is coming in and they're throwing them out on the sidewalks and smashing them. And he said, that's not really good for your reputation. And so there we were at 10 o'clock at night getting our toughness instruments out of the clinics. So we didn't have any instruments when the FDA came, and the investigators came the next day and walked through the office, and they said, we see you don't have any instruments, you're okay. And we're breathing a sigh of relief. And so we started then, and I said, I'm never going to have another instrument that won't stand up to government scrutiny. It has to follow the rules because toughness couldn't get FDA approval. So we started there, and we started using Van Rump. That was another light force technique. I couldn't handle his philosophy, but he had some ideas. And they used a thumb thrust. And this thumb thrust, you brought your elbows together. Well, after doing that for a few weeks, we said there's got to be a better way to do this. That's how the quest for the instrument started. Mm-hmm. And if you go into the Fuhr Science Center, there's a library there, or a little building. In the building, it's a little room that shows the sequence of events of the instruments that we had developed and invented, all the way up to the Activator 5 that we have right now. And it's quite a thing. Students are really excited. And then we have a push button type of video setup where they go over and if you'd like to know the history of Activator, you punch this button, and then I come out on video just like this, and I tell them about how we started the Activator and what we did with the Activator and so forth. And it's been a big hit because, Logan has 1,000 students there.
Yeah.
They all want to know what happened. How did it get this way? And my wife also put my report card there. And there was a C in biochemistry. The kid came up to me and he said, Dr. Fuhr, I can't thank you enough for putting your report card out. And I said, why? He said, well, I had a C and they told me I couldn't be successful. And look at you, and you had a C. It's crazy what attracts students. So that's the Fuhr Science Center. And if you're ever in St. Louis, you got to go take a look.
Right. And if you don't get there, you can always look up at least the historical. This is the September issue 2012. It's in the archives of the AmericanChiropractor.com online. So they can look that one up as well.
Well, it's not we were just biochemistry building, Dr. Fuhr. So
pardon me?
Please go ahead. No, I was being smart aleck here. But go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that we just have a front page picture, on the American Chiropractor, that kind of shows you a picture of the ribbon cutting or of the, when we started it. And it took 3 years to build it. And so it's all finished now. And we dedicated it September 26th. And so we're got that project underway.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Dr. Fuhr, do you have an annual meeting that you get everyone together at, or are there any gatherings that you kind of coordinate that people who want to be closer with the technique, maybe closer with you and your legacy, can participate in?
Well, here's the thing. When the pandemic hit, we went virtual, and we've been doing virtual, but there's been a cry for live seminar, and so what we're in the process of doing is we're going to have a live seminar. We haven't got the dates set yet, but it's going to be on Logan's campus, because we thought, what a place to put it, because we've got enough room for 100 people to come for just the technique room or even more. And then they get to see the whole campus and they get to see everything there. And if they've got kids that are going to be students or want to be students, they can see that also. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our college instructors, and we're going to have a yearly meeting with the college instructors. I do a tape right now to give the college instructors some history and so forth, so they know what they should be doing to teach students. But we think it'd be good for them to come in and learn where we are at, where we are going, and what we've got planned. We've got a research facility in Madrid, Spain. I don't know if you knew that, but somebody asked me one time, how do you get so successful? And I said, well, I surround myself with smart women. Yeah, it's truer than you think. Arantxa Ortega de Muse is a molecular biologist, and she lives in Madrid, and they have a data collection center there that Activator supports with NICR money. That's the National Institute of Chiropractic Research, which has given over $1 million back to chiropractic. When you buy an instrument, 1% of it goes back to chiropractic. Wow. And Ricardo Fujikawa, who's an MD, DC, PhD candidate, there's some smart folks. They had that data collection center. In the last 4 papers that they put out for publication, they were accepted in scientific reports as a part of Nature. Now, if you are publishing in Nature, then you have made it to the top. Example, JMPT affects about 3% of the scientific community. Nature is 80%. That tell you anything? So Arantxa and Ricardo, we support them because we're doing research. For example, I wanted to know as a clinician, can I adjust an osteoporotic hip? And we not only found out was it safe to do it, but we found out after 3 weeks of adjustments, the trabeculum in the hip started reorganizing and growing. And so that got published in Nature. And that's a big time thing, to have a paper published in Nature. So these are the kind of things that we're interested in now, is going to the general scientific community. I mean, Ohio State heard about us through Nature. So
no, that's fantastic. I mean, it sounds very exciting, and it's really encouraging the international community, helping push forth this evolution of research, right? So, I mean, the Activator at this point, I don't think anyone studied an instrument-based adjusting tool as much as this, right? So,
correct.
Are you in Brazil now? Ricardo's in Brazil, of course. I've met him.
Oh, Ricardo in Spain.
Right. Well, he's in Madrid, but he's from Brazil originally, right? So, right. So,
contingency in Brazil.
Sure. Yeah. So, are you also in Brazil? Some of our audience is international. Do you sell into Brazil?
Yes, we sure do, because that was just part of this new ISO MedSap thing. It's Brazil, Australia, Mexico, and there's one other one I can't think of, but they all got together and decided to make their standards all the same. Mm-hmm. So that's why we got into this regulatory thing.
Even better for you, because then it's not triple work, right? So is the proficiency rating also in other languages or just English?
We got 4 languages now.
Perfect.
Wow.
Very good.
Well, I found the cover of the American Chiropractor you're referring to. This is the most recent one. This is the September 2024. That's just this year. It's the peel off cover. So this is the month that's available also online. And of course, the doctors all got in their mailbox in September. It's only about a month ago. So that's still probably around their offices. If they haven't looked at it, that tells more about your 4 Science Center and of course anything else. So we look forward, and of course the upcoming issue, December, featuring What Does It Take to Be Number One Instrument Adjusting Chiropractic Technique by Dr. Arlan Fuhr. I'm trying to think. I think we've kind of gone over our standard 30 minutes, but we'll see when we get this taken care of. Is there anything else you wanted to tell our listeners, at least for this time, Arlan? We're going to have to bring you back again, I'm sure.
Well, I'm happy to come on this podcast because there's so many things out there that people just don't know, because they're not in school. and they're not around schools and so forth. And so I'm happy to give you a warning about the regulatory things. Just
Right.
ask your people that you're dealing with, do they have FDA, ISO, MedSap? Those are
Right.
things you just have to ask. Some of them don't even know what it means.
Well, it introduces a lot of questions even for me, Arlen, actually, considering does that influence some of these tables, some of these lasers? I don't know. I mean, that's a
Well, no, the laser people are really quite good with regulation
yeah,
because they had, yeah, the laser people I wouldn't worry about.
they're
It's
aggressive.
most,
They're aggressive on their regulation adherence, I'll tell you that.
well, yes, they are because, you're putting current into the body. And, I happen to know, Medtronics, and I know, like Max Kanarski and that whole group.
Sure.
We've done business with them for years,
Hmm.
and we brought into seminars and everything, Walter Radiance,
Yeah, sure.
and and we're careful about what our doctors get. And so that's why we're probably up on the regulatory things more than most people, just because we want to protect our doctors out there.
Hmm. That's amazing. Well,
Very
super.
good.
Thank you so much for listening, for coming in, joining. Dr. Joe, did you have anything else you wanted to ask Arlen before we?
No, just I mean, if you have a good resource, because I want to carry an article on that topic, honestly, to go more in depth. If you have a good resource for me to reach out to, I'd happily follow it up.
We have a company that we hired to come in that are experts on that. And
Mhm.
if you look at my podcast, you'll see there's one with Marcus McGee or Marcus G. I'm sorry, GEE. Look on the podcast.
Hmm.
That's your
And
Activate Your Practice podcast, correct? Activate Your Practice.
Hmm.
yeah, just go to Activate Your Practice and then look at regulatory things with Marcus. And
I will.
he will give you the correct, detailed information. I'm giving you an overview here just to say, be careful.
Awesome.
Raise the flag. I got it. Perfect. Well, very happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us here on TAC Tic Talk. Any final words for our listeners out there?
Well, I guess the one thing that I'm happy about is chiropractic is opening up, and the scientific community is finally getting on to where it should be, and we can see the results, just like I said, with the Ohio State colleague saying, can you help us with a project that wouldn't have happened? Again, I was like shocked myself. And I told them, they said, you must be really smart. I said, no, I surround myself with smart people, but I have clinical questions. And if I have anything to contribute, is how can I adjust somebody better,
Mhm.
faster, to make them well quicker? And,
Mhm.
that's my goal and
Well,
still
that's
has been.
terrific.
I got a saying, I haven't yet.
Hmm.
You can have all of the other neurology and all the other things, and that's all fine. All the athletic training stuff, that's fine. But when you walk into a room, there are three things you have to know: where to adjust, when to adjust, and when to quit.
Right.
Yeah.
When to quit. Right. So that's
You
the.
know those three things, and you're in good shape.
Well, slow and steady wins the race. It's an honor to have you here. We got to do this more often. Jacqueline, any final words?
I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Fuhr, for making the time. It's been really difficult. I know, like, I've got a sore throat today, so if you don't hear me much, that's why. But thank you for scheduling time with us, and we'll definitely invite you back more often. Articles, podcasts, and definitely looking forward to seeing you at the upcoming events. We love seeing you at these shows when we get together.